the future of smoking in Europe, about regulation, data generation, and most importantly about the cancer plan. We have the Beating Cancer Plan. I would like to welcome Carl Fagerström, that he's going to give us his talk on harm reduction, endgame, and target achieved. And I'm going to present the score position on the Beat Cancer Plan. And we have eminent panelists, Dr. Bueno, Dr. Bukovinas, and Dr. Wiberg, to discuss proposals on these policies and how we can improve our position in Europe and suggest more innovative changes regarding cancer plan. And I welcome Carl Fagerström to give his presentation.
So the tobacco endgame, many countries have adopted an endgame definition. For Sweden, like many other countries, it includes a smoking prevalence rate of less than 5%. Young adults from 15 to 24 years of age, we see that the smoking prevalence in Norway and Sweden is almost disappearing. Norway is at 2% and Sweden is at 3%. So this is very good news, and 33 for the next best country. So I would say clearly the smoking attributable mortality in Sweden is low and very much lower than in the other countries. It has been some calculations that is men in the EU have had the same tobacco habits as those we have in Sweden. There would have been a staggering 355,000 deaths fewer per year. To me, it's actually these products that are called Snus. They have largely replaced smoking. And that we can see on this picture where we have, on these curves, we have cigarettes that grew up till 1970s, 80s when it started to come down, and because probably snus was coming up. If we look at the right side of this slide, we see what is happening in Norway, where the men 16 to 24 years of age, we see the same, that smoking has gone down and snus has gone up. The same in women, smoking down, snus up, and smoking is very much down. And also the total, the yellow color, the total use of tobacco has gone down considerably in women, a little less, but although downwards in men. So in summary, combustible products like cigarettes, they seem to can be replaced. And non-combustible products like Swedish snus is significantly less harmful. And today we have oral nicotine pouches with tobacco that are thought to be even less harmful.
And I would like to ask Dr. Wiberg for his comment.
Thank you very much. Let me first correct you. I am not a doctor, and I would like to, first of all, thank everybody for inviting me. And Professor Carl Fagerström put down the numbers. Sweden and Norway and even Iceland are already there. We have reached the WHO and the BECA target of 5% daily smokers. There has been, by Dr. Bukovinas, mentioning, and also yourself, Doctor, we need more data. I would like to, if it's suitable now, to show some slides about big data, the Swedish experience, and in particular in connection with the European Beating Cancer Plan. I'm Bengt Wiberg, CEO of Stink-Free AB, an inventor and a patent holder of a new pouch technology. I'm also the founder of EUforsnus consumer crowd movement. We have thousands of members and followers from over 100 countries. and more than 80% of us are former smokers who has managed to quit smoking for good with either original snus or modern tobacco-free nicotine pouches. And the subject today is the Swedish experience of snus, big data, massive data, and European beating cancer plan. I was very happy Dr. Fagerström just showed this picture. It shows the smoking prevalence among 15 to 24 years old in the European Union, plus Norway and the UK. And this is fresh data from the Eurobarometer 2021. If we look down to the left, you find in orange the smoking prevalence of these young adults in Sweden is down to 3%. But look to the far left. This is incredible. Norway, where snus was introduced only some 20 years ago, is even lower smoking prevalence than Sweden. So what is the Swedish experience? The tobacco consumption in Sweden is the same as the European Union average, but we have the lowest tobacco mortality as well as the lowest cancer rates in the European Union. So why? Mainly because Swedes have replaced smoking with snus or modern oral nicotine pouches. And I would also like to mention, which is not in this diagram, Iceland have same figures, I think, as Sweden and Norway. I'd like to connect now with what has been said before, and I've studied the BECA, the European Beating Cancer Plan, carefully, and I'd like to bring out 4 quotes from the BECA plan. It starts by saying that about 40% of cancers in the EU are preventable, such as cancers caused by smoking. And as we go further into the document, suddenly we have a quote saying, tobacco consumption continues to be the leading cause of preventable cancers. Snus is a tobacco product, so it's widening. We go from smoking, which everybody knows is the most dangerous thing you can do, takes the most lives on the planet, even more than COVID-19, if I'm correct. And as we go further, the BECA plan says, through rigorous enforcement, including stricter rules on novel products. So we are going from smoking to tobacco to anything containing nicotine. That's what I read in this report. Let's continue. Another quote, Europe's Beating Cancer Plan will use the remarkable potential of new technologies and scientific progress. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a look at relative risk. This is a recent study, one of several, trying to plot the relative risk of different nicotine products in relation to smoking, where smoking in this case has 100% risk. If we look to the far right, to the very lowest relative risk as compared to smoking, we do find new technologies, science. We have, for example, heat-not-burn devices, electronic cigarettes, and non-tobacco pouches, nicotine pouches. For those who doesn't know how snus or nicotine pouches looks like, this is like a tea bag that you place on your upper or lower lip. Snus is not a novel product. It's been around in Sweden for some 200 years. But the evidence, the epidemiological evidence is overwhelming. And what we see now in Norway is they are repeating the Swedish experience to become the Norwegian experience but they are doing this in a much, much shorter time, as you will see. So let's have a look at some big data in regards to risks of snus. In 2017, the Global Burden of Disease study, which is the biggest metadata epidemiological study in the world, was published in the Lancet. And it concludes that Swedish type of snus has no higher relative risk than 1.0 for any health outcome. And this study, the GBD study, covers 26 years of published science worldwide. And for those people who are perhaps not so familiar with relative risk, I brought along a quote from Professor Stefan Willers from the Swedish Medical Journal in 2018. It says, a recent large epidemiological study could not demonstrate any increased risk of disease with Swedish snus. There is more big data. The Karolinska Institute released in May 2020. They did a study on, perhaps I should say that Sweden has enormous registers of persons' health, cancer registry, and we even have cohorts going back more than 30 years. And the conclusion was that compared to never snus use, ever snus user was not associated with oral cancer. And this study covered 418,000 Swedish male participants, which correspond to 9.2 million person years. And not shown in this slide is the fact that normal snus use, which is 4 cans or less per week, each one contained 20 pouches, is related to 35% lower risk of getting oral cancer than non-users of snus. This is amazing statistics. So my conclusions is that the BECA plan sadly misses out on pointing out the huge difference in risk between combustible and non-combustible nicotine product. And as you said before, Dr. Ikonidis, we have the evidence in Sweden, Norway, Iceland, and why not copy this or consider it instead of inventing the wheel again, so to say? And also, like it is suggested here, to regulate lower risk alternatives rigorously. I finished by saying that I believe the Swedish experience should be available to all Europeans and acknowledged, and also acknowledge that nicotine in itself is not what causing cancer. If this was included more in the report, I think the results would be much better. Thank you very much.
That was an excellent presentation by Mr. Wiberg, and I think it has supported furthermore the evidence by Professor Fagerström, showing that, for example, nicotine itself is not the problem. And it's not that nicotine has to be accused for the effects. What it has shown is that switching from tobacco to another product that is non-combustible, we may have a very, very important improvement. Ask Mr. Wiberg for a comment, and I will read the questions so we can discuss around the questions as well. Mr. Wiberg, in the second round?
Yes. Could I pick a question of my choosing? Maybe introduce some news? to the rest of the world. The question was from George Mihas, and the question is, how can we exploit registries to document harm from different products? Can we establish registries for healthy tobacco users? I don't know if you know this, but in Sweden we have these huge big data spanning back so many years. It's the patient register, the cancer register, the mortality register, and we are introducing in Sweden, as the first country in the world, there will be a tobacco cohort registered by all of Sweden's dentists. And what is so special about this? Because already today, the Folktandvården, the biggest dental sort of government chain in Sweden, is registering whether the dental patient is using snus, or if the person is smoking, or if the person is a non-tobacco user. Now, I think from 2022, we will have a complete such tobacco cohort from the Swedish dental community. And what does this mean? It means that we will be able to differentiate, we should be, between the harms of smoking and the harms of snus, and compare this to non-use. So this is very exciting, and I'd be glad to share if any of you want to know more about this project. But it's ongoing right now, and I try to follow it as careful as I can.
Okay, that's great news, and that answers partly the question that do we need more observational studies on smoking habit, included though e-cigarettes and novel tobacco products, for example, like non-combustible smoking products, heated not burn products, and do we need to establish a European observatory probably, or local observatory for these novel products? It seems that the relative risk combustible products is much smaller. Does this justify their use? Is it just to negate their use? From Mrs. Nicole, who would like to answer that? Dr. Wiberg, yes, let us know.
Not a doctor.
Yeah, sorry.
I wish. I think looking for those who saw the slides of Professor Fagerström, and I happen to have the same slide. Looking at Norway, there's a lot of talk about the problem is adolescents, young people, and all nicotine products, in my opinion, should have an age limit. It is not goodies, it's not sweets. But looking back at Norway, in 2000, year 2000, there were 30% daily smoking among 16 to 24-year-old Norwegian women in just 20 years. And very much thanks to the introduction of snus, that figure is now down to 1%. Dr. Fagerström also mentioned the latest Eurobarometer figures, stating that 15 to 24-year-olds in Europe are now down to smoking prevalence down to 2% in Norway and 3% of Sweden. I am not a doctor, I'm not a professor, but to me at least, this proves that we don't have a high uptake of new nicotine users among the young adults. But we do have in the world, as been mentioned before, 1.1 billion adult daily smokers. By restricting access to all nicotine products for those under the legal age, we can do a lot of good for all the adults who are smoking.
Yeah, this is, I think, something that we all agree. And there is also one more question for Sweden, because Sweden has the data again. Any explanation why the Swedish women do not follow the good results on low cancer incidence as the male population, I suppose?
To the best of my ability. In Sweden, we are one of the few countries in the world where smoking prevalence among women is higher than the men's. Another speaker today at this excellent forum listed that about 83% of the world's smokers are men, while only 17% are women. So an acquaintance of mine, Professor Brad Rudel from United States, he once told me that the only really fantastic thing that Swedish men can teach Swedish women is their choice of nicotine products. Swedish men use snus at the rate, adult men use snus at the rate of 20%, while women use snus in a much lesser degree. But as we see these new products, these tobacco-free nicotine pouches, statistics also show that many women who are smoking are trying to switch to these products based on sales records of the biggest snus and nicotine pouch seller in Northern Europe.
Actually, can I ask you, do you have any data if there is any percent of naive snus users that they have started snus and they were not prior smokers?
I do have, but I do not have it right now. But the number of new users is much less than the number of adult users. Dr. Lars Ranström published a report et al. In 2016 showing that 86% of Swedish men and women who were snus users are former smokers. And this study involving some 66,000 Swedish men and women showed that after 6 years, I think it was 6 or 8 years, 1/3 of these snus using persons had quit all nicotine use. So I think we do have the statistics in Sweden indicating that the number of young people who are have not been smoking, who start with these products, is not a very high figure.